Good to see you.
Great to see you.
Shari, the world has changed a lot since we last sat down together.
It has and it hasn't.
It has and it hasn't, that's right. The last time we sat down together, one of the things we talked about was the leadership in newsrooms at Paramount and beyond around the anti-Semitism issue, which I know is something that you are very passionate about. And I wanted to just get your quick take. How has that evolved from your perspective? Do you think it's gotten better? Do you think it's gotten worse?
I think it's still a problem. And I think that we've gotten to the point where news needs to be more balanced. It needs to be fact-based. I think the people's opinions are getting confused with the facts. And I think we still have the same challenge we had before, which is we need more accountability, we need more standards, we need checks and balances, and we have to go back to a place where facts are what the news is about, and opinions are not facts. And by the way, you can have opinions, but then you need to have people with different opinions and different sides so people can hear everything. And I think that the line has gotten very confused between facts and opinion. So I don't think it's gotten any better. I think people are addressing it now more aggressively, and hopefully in the end that will lead to a better experience for consumers.
You at the time were very vocal about how you felt CBS handled that within the organization. Now you no longer own Paramount and CBS. It's in the hands of David Ellison. Are you bullish or bearish that this problem will be, not problem, but that this situation will improve under that new ownership?
Well, clearly I'm not involved in the management of the company, but from what I've heard, I think they are addressing the issue. They are bringing somebody in to do standards. You know, I was very excited when Susan Zirinsky came on board and she started reviewing that, and I think you immediately saw a change at the news. I think some of the journalists were actually grateful for the guidance that they were receiving, and I think, you know, from the chatter that, you know, David's going in that direction, and I know there's been talk about Barry, and I think she would be a good voice, so I'm hopeful.
And when you say she would be a good voice, meaning you think it would be good if they acquired the Free Press, elevated Barry?
Well, I'm not going to go into it from a business standpoint, but I do think she's a voice that would bring a different perspective, and that I think at the end of the day, you got to give your audience credit for being smart enough to hear different points of view and being able to narrow down on the facts.
The entire process by which the Paramount Skydance deal went down took up so much space in the media universe because it was so complicated from a regulatory perspective. You had the FCC probe into CBS, you had the settlement. I want to get your take on that. Like, did you think CBS did the right thing settling?
Absolutely. I mean, having nothing to do with anything other than what our responsibility was, you know, as chairman of the board and as board members, it was very disruptive to the company. It was very expensive to run. I mean, I was not involved. I recused myself from the specifics of the settlement, but I was always an advocate for settling the case because I felt it was really a distraction. It took up way too much time in the news, which really had an impact on our employees, on our ability to do other transactions. If you look at everybody else, they settled quickly to avoid exactly the problem that our company had to face. In the settlement, you never know what's going to happen in discovery. The trial was set for 2 years from now, which would have meant this would have been a problem that had to continue for 2 years. There was a threat of a defamation case in Florida. And, you know, having previously in another life been an attorney, going to trial is never a no matter how strong your case may or may not be. There are a lot of inconsistencies. And I think the best thing that's happened now is that the company is in a position where it can move forward and be in the business of doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
Outside of the settlement, there were other actions taken to ensure there would be regulatory approval. You know, I think about rollbacks of DEI policies. I think about some things like the cancellation of Steve Colbert's show, you know, that was never explicitly stated as being part of getting regulatory approval, but it's something that I think a lot of people assumed. Do you think that they made the right choices to ensure that they got the regulatory approval?
I'm not going to tie any of that to regulatory approval. I can tell you that we had been looking at late night. It was financially not viable. It had been that way for a long time. We had made a decision months prior to the announcement that we were not going to be going forward with that show. I love Stephen, he does a great job, but we really needed to be in a financially viable business, and you saw we did that with James Corden as well. And in terms of DEI, I think the reasons why DEI exists matter, and will always matter, and we need to continue to fight for those issues. But I think the way in which DEI has been executed has often led to more problems than it solved. So any of the changes that were made or continue to be made, but under us, I think we were trying to create an environment that would address the issues in a different way.
So now looking back at everything that's gone down, you are completely out, the Ellisons have completely come in. What is something that you're hopeful for about the future of CBS and of Paramount under this new leadership?
Well, I'm certainly hopeful that they get the news right. And I'm hopeful that they continue the legacy of creating great content and impactful content and making a difference. I think we did create a great culture at the company. That's one of the things that I'm really proud of. So I hope that they continue that.
I've asked everybody here on stage, so I'm going to ask you as well. I would love your reflection on what happened over the past day with Kimmel. You know, do you feel as though this regulatory environment is pushing media companies to sort of concede in intimidation?
What I would say about Jimmy Kimmel, and one thing I want to say is, you know, people have made the comparison with Stephen Colbert. So I know that for us it was made a business decision, and I don't know all of the facts around the decision that was made. I don't have the history, I don't have the context, so I'm certainly not going to speak to why ABC made the decision or whether it was the right thing. I just think we all, not because of Trump or because of any other reasons, but I do think we all need to be thoughtful of the content we're putting on air, given the division that exists in this country. And that's not a direct reflection on Kimmel, that's just a much broader reflection on the world we're living in and the responsibility we have to be thoughtful about what content we put on air.
Thinking about thoughtfulness of content and on-air production, when you first sort of announced that you were going to be stepping out of this role with Paramount, and you had said you would be moving more into Israel sort of advocacy issues to fight anti-Semitism and education, I think something that I've seen shift is it seems like you are eager and interested in also being a part of BDM production. You have done some work with Broadway. You just announced a role with Cyper, an Israel-based production firm. So is that going to be a bigger part of your portfolio?
No. I like good questions complicated with simple answers. I got involved with CPOR, frankly, because we had worked with them on the film We Will Dance Again, which won an Emmy, if you don't know, which was all about, you know, what happened at the Nova Music Festival on October 7th. So I originally started spending time with Emilio, who's the CEO and founder of the company, and just talking to him about We Will Dance Again, about his company. And the more I spent time with him and I got to know his team and I took a look at the content, you know, that he was creating, it started to be exciting to look at it a bit differently and to work with him going forward. But I think that's very consistent with what I'm doing. One, an important part of that company is they do create documentaries. We're working with Yariv Mosher on another documentary as a follow-up to October 7th. But they also create great commercial content. And they have a vision to be an international studio based in Israel. And to me, supporting Israel is one of the ways in which we can fight the negativity that's out there around the country right now. And one of the things I love about this company is that they have already executed on the vision that they have. So if I can just tell you for 1 minute, you know, we're doing a show in Argentina with Noah Corral, who is one of the top female singers in Israel. And it's a musical romantic comedy that is being filmed in Argentina for the Latin American audience. We're doing a project in Australia, which is going to be a political thriller, where we're working based on there. Another show I'm really excited about is called Heart of the Killer, which is about a female doctor. It's based in Israel, who gets involved with the illegal organ transplant business to try to save the life of a friend, and then it continues with, you know, things along that line. So, and again, working with Yariv Mosher on the documentary side. So to me, that's very consistent with my role in wanting to be supportive of Israel and in creating content that will have an impact. And in terms of my other production, you know, I've gotten involved in doing some other films, you know, that are supportive of Israel, and of course in Broadway, which was fun. My partner there, Alex Levy, who I think might be here today, he actually produced a show called Job, which was fantastic. And then together we invested in Sunset Boulevard, which won a Tony. So this was a good year for me. And now we're very excited to be bringing Giant to Broadway in the spring. We were involved in the production of London. It was a big hit. So it's something that's really fun. And it just coincidentally, Giant is involved really in the anti-Semitic legacy of Roald Dahl. So it really does, in the end, combine very well with what I'm doing in my foundation. But it's fun.
Something that strikes me about you, Shari, is that when you talk to a lot of people in media, high-level media, a lot of them are supporters of Israel, but they're not vocal about it because right now, in such hyper-partisan environment, it can feel like a business risk to put your neck out there and to support one side of a war or one side of a cause. Why are you so passionate, and why do you feel so comfortable when a lot of your peers do not?
You've never known me to run from controversy. But honestly, I speak to kids, and what I always say is we have a responsibility and an obligation to use our voices and to use our platforms to create the world that we want for our children. And it's great to think something quietly and to be supportive over the dinner conversations. But if we can't use our voices and really help to change the narrative and influence the narrative, what are we doing? So to me, it's very, very important, and that's why I'm so engaged with creating content that presents Israel in a different way. And by the way, supporting Israel doesn't mean we agree with everything they do, everything the government does. Supporting the United States doesn't mean that we agree with everything our government does. But there's something about Israel that it's a magnet. Somebody told me the other day it's like 0.02% of the population and 60% of this negative coverage that we're seeing on here. People aren't talking about what's happening in Sudan. They're not talking about other, countries. I laugh because you talked about the attention that, Paramount got during the transaction and everything else. There are certain things that seem to be magnets, and not always for the right reason. So I really want to kind of cut through that and be a voice that presents the other side and that, tries to use the platforms I have to get content out there, because I am a big believer always that content leads to conversation that leads to change. And so that's why I'm still in the media space, and you can look at content as the conference you're doing today, as a show on Broadway, as a film, as a series, as an experience, and that's what I feel my mission is.
You mentioned, using your voice. Right now, we're in such an interesting time around the free speech debate. On one hand, you have groups who think that we're not doing enough to uphold free speech and we're censoring it. And others think that, there's more that we could be doing to, I'm trying to be coy here and not trip over myself.
I'm listening carefully to your words.
Yeah, I just think that the free speech debate has become very politicized, and interpretation of the First Amendment has become very politicized. And you're somebody who wants to use your voice. Like, how do media companies use their voice, tell the truth in this era where it feels like the First Amendment is being politicized, weaponized, and sometimes against the law, oftentimes against media companies?
Well, first, I just have to say, when you talk about First Amendment speech, I do think about what happened on the college campuses. So I do want to draw a distinction between free speech and hate speech, because hate speech is not protected by the First Amendment. And I think that's what we saw a lot on college campuses, that the presidents did not go out and protect kids the way they needed to. So I want to make that distinction. And I think you have to have the facts. And that's why I come back to a balanced approach that is fact-based. We have to be able to distinguish between the facts and between our opinions. And one of the things that I find, even in the conversation around DEI and other things, is that we get caught up a lot of times in these arguments. But if we could both take one step backwards and understand where we're agreeing and where we're disagreeing, we can often create common ground. So I think it's really important to have those facts, to know what you're talking about, but to continue those discussions. Because honest to God, I remember another statistic I used once that, people, and I do a lot of work bringing the Black and Jewish community together. And like, our genetics are what, 99 point some percent or 97 the same, and our difference is so little, and yet we allow that to divide us. So I think more than ever, the more complicated the world gets, the more important for us to be very simple, to talk the facts, to build relationships, and to have those tough conversations that ultimately will bring people together.
What about a world where people don't agree on what the facts are?
Well, that's a real problem. And that's why you have to make sure that if you're presenting your opinion of fact, you need to make sure you have another perspective out there so that people can see that. And that's really interesting because I know one of the concerns, I met with the IDF in Israel, that they had is when people are going to go back and they're going to look up October 7th and they're going to use AI and they're going to find the content that's most viral, will the facts, will the truth be lost? And I think that's what's become very complicated today. It wasn't so complicated before, and I think, just like I said, things have changed, things haven't. Sometimes going back to basics is not a bad thing, and I think that's something that we need to do.
At Axios, we always like to end on one fun thing, Shari. So looking back at your career, all the things that you went through with Paramount, what is the one thing that you are the most proud of?
Surviving. No. I can't say that there was one thing, so thanks for the question, but I think, it goes way back then. Look, I'm so glad these companies came back together again. I don't know what the future holds for them, but, just last year we became the #4 streaming service. We were the last to market, and thank you for that. We were the last to market, and I think we found a really great way to, on a limited budget, get more #1 hits per dollar spent than any other company. But what I'm really happy about is the culture we created in the company, the success we had as a company. Last year was we had one of the best financial performances that we had had in years. And I really think we positioned the company well for the future, and that the Ellisons will bring in the financial resources they have, the technology to really be able to compete in the media, environment. It's been complicated. It hasn't always been fun. I'm super grateful for a lot of the people I had the opportunity to work with. But now I'm super excited about what I get to do next. And I ask all of you guys, whatever side you're on everything, don't look at it as sides. Look at it as an opportunity. Use your voices to bring people together. Because I really believe we have to be very proactive, and then we can make things happen and make the world that we want.
Shari Redstone, always a fiery conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
everybody.
Thank you.